Odegaard qui cherchait Saka, Jorginho qui s'en mêle dans ses dribbles et qui peut enchaîner avec Ben White. Cette fois il n'y a pas d'enjeu, tête de Tyron Mix, plein axe. Et ça, Bukayo Saka ne laisse pas passer. Bukayo Saka est lui aussi phénoménal. Odegaard et Saka qui ont joué vite ce corner. Odegaard, Zinchenko, faut frapper, faut mettre toute la puissance et marquer un sacré but. Alexandre Zinchenko sonne la révolte d'Arsenal. Un sacré coup de patte du gaucher ukrainien. Et Arsenal qui retrouve l'envie, la fougue et l'espoir.
Atrás con Konsa. Uy, Nketiah que le roba la cartera a Konsa. El balón para Odegaard.
Madre
fuera,
mía.
fuera, fuera, fuera. Ocasión clamorosa para Martin Odegaard. Bailey al larguero.
Pero es que además hay una parada extraordinaria de Aaron Ramsdale.
Sí, señor. Martinelli busca un pase. Balón atrás.
¡Madre mía!
¡Gol!
¡Qué locura!
¡Gol de Jorginho!
Martinelli وحاول Martinelli إلى Jorginho Allah
Martinelli, faut qu'il aille provoquer Martinelli dans cette surface. Faut qu'il se passe quelque chose en retrait. Jorginho! Oh, quel but de Jorginho avec un maximum de réussite. Martinez qui marque d'une certaine manière contre son camp. Mais le coup de pétard de Jorginho.
Todo Villa Park expectante, la Premier League mirando el Manchester City, el Manchester United, todos los equipos pendientes de este Villa Arsenal. El córner ejecutado por Lucas Digne al punto de penalti, despeja la defensa Gunner. Ojo que puede venir el contragolpe, dirige Fabio Vieira. Fabio Vieira que avanza, mete el pase para Martinelli. Martinelli es el cuarto. Martinelli es el cuarto. Martinelli es el cuarto. Gol, 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 gol. Gol del Arsenal. El cuarto del partido al contragolpe.
Vieira, il n'y a pas de gardien. Fabio Vieira, faut tenter le coup. Fabio Vieira avec Martinelli. Martinelli qui va aller jusqu'en terre promise. Et le 4e but pour Arsenal. Phénoménal. Bukayo Saka. Phénoménal. Jorginho. Quel but. Quel but. Quel but. Bukayo Saka. Phénoménal. Quel but.
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, a very goodly morning to you, to everyone listening, and of course to Emi Martinez.
Yes, a very goodly morning. We all raise a goodly morning mug to Emi Martinez.
Isn't it funny that Emi Martinez basically plays with a guy whose name means goodly morning?
Of course. Buen dia.
Emi, buen dia.
We should have known. The signs were there all along. Yes, listen, it didn't always look like it was going to be a happy one, but it ended very happily indeed.
It certainly did end very happily, and you're right to say it did not look like it was going to be a happy one, but isn't that just the ridiculous nature of football that, you know, how many hundreds and thousands of football matches have we watched between us and all the people listening to this? How many matches have you watched? And you know things about the game. You know things about football. You know the way certain games transpire. But even though we've seen many things down the past, good, bad, and indifferent, the ability of this game to sort of lift you from panic/despair, whatever people were feeling at 2-1 down, to whatever the hell that was at the end. I don't quite know how to describe it, as joy, elation, hilarity, all of those things. That it can still do that to you is sort of a wonder, isn't it? Because we should be sort of used to it by now, but I don't think you ever do get used to things happening the way things happened in this game.
No, I think that's true. And it's funny, you know, I think we spoke in the build-up about the win at Aston Villa last season and how at one point it seemed that was going to be a really kind of galvanising moment in our season. And you feel like this could be too. I mean, the result is one thing, the performance is another, but I think the impact of it is significant. You know, I think you just see the celebrations for the last couple of goals and at full time, it's really evident what this has done for the players, and coupled with the Manchester City result against Nottingham Forest, it's really just transformed the outlook at the club and around the club. I mean, things seem so much brighter than just a few days ago.
Well, that's it. It's a complete sea change from where we were on Wednesday night, Thursday morning after the Man City game. You're thinking, things aren't going our way, and sometimes it's difficult to get yourself out of a funk, and just mad things can happen in football. Mad things can happen in your games and in other games that change the landscape and change the mood. And I think you're right to say this could be a galvanizing win. Like, it feels like a shot in the arm kind of victory. Sometimes you can scrap out a victory and you go, okay, yeah, well, that was good 3 points. We needed those. But I think this was a result that we badly needed. And on a day where I think everybody at Arsenal and fans would say first half really not good enough, not anywhere close to being good enough, to be able to turn it around, to show the character, to show the quality, to show the determination, even if it came with a little bit of good fortune here and there, to be able to do that speaks volumes about what this team is capable of, and I think maybe has assuaged some of the doubts that might have just crept in over the last couple of weeks where, I don't know, I mean, I'm sure there were people going, was it all just, were we overperforming our XG, if you like, and now things are coming back to normal. But, you can really sense that this threw off some of the shackles, hopefully. That won't be evident until we play again and play again and play again, but if you can't come away from this one without taking all the positives, and there are negatives that we'll discuss in this, of course, but, I think for the team and for the manager and everyone else, it really is a huge victory because it did, as you say, look for a while like it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. And, sometimes you don't know what you need until you get it, but this was kind of exactly what Arsenal needed. I think the comeback narrative in the game of twice being behind, going on to win it in late fashion, it will have instilled so much more belief, back into the players. And it is exactly what we were looking for. We just probably didn't quite realise it at the time. And I think, it was just like a lot of there was a lot of catharsis, I think, in those stoppage time minutes as well, because there's been a lot of frustration. Obviously, the City game was really disappointing. Brentford, we had all the issues with VAR and the disallowed goal, and felt like a sense of injustice there. Goodison Park before that, another disappointing performance and poor result. And I think, it felt like a lot of it was exercised in those final few moments. And fingers crossed, it provides a kind of platform for us to go again. It reminded me a little bit, obviously this story doesn't quite end how we wanted, but last season it reminded me a little bit of when we went to Stamford Bridge, off the back of a few bad results, really trying circumstances, and got a big win there. And it did kind of set up a kind of second charge for the top four, one that ultimately, as I say, didn't pan out as we might have hoped. But that result propelled us through the next few games. And I hope this result could have the same effect for Arsenal now.
Yes, I hope so too. So, shall we start with the first half? Because we need to get that out of the way before we get on to all the good, funny stuff.
Yes, I think so.
It wasn't a good first half. I mean, he did make a couple of changes to the team from Man City. Ben White came back in at right back. Leandro Trossard got a start ahead of Gabriel Martinelli. Beyond that, realistically, I don't know that there was much more he could have done. I mean, there were a couple of options, but I wasn't convinced he was going to go there.
No, I thought maybe Kieran Tierney would come in.
I sort of thought that too, but I wasn't surprised to see Zinchenko start.
No, I mean, Zinchenko has sort of achieved Xhaka status, I think, of if fit, he starts under Arteta.
I think that could be true, yeah.
But, he didn't cover himself in glory on this opening goal after just, 6 minutes, was it?
No, he lost the ball high up the pitch, but, that was a bit careless, a bit casual. But I do think you have to look at how quickly it went from us losing the ball just outside the opposition box to danger at the other end. So I don't think you can pin it all on Zinchenko by any means. I mean, it's a decent break. It's a good finish by Ollie Watkins. I do think maybe William Saliba could have got there a bit quicker, maybe got a bit tighter to him, forced him the other way. Not brilliant defending, not terrible defending, but not brilliant defending. And it's a very good finish, you have to say. But it's a sort of sucker punch goal that we used to concede quite a bit. We haven't seen us concede that goal and indeed the second goal for quite some time. So, a bit worrying from a defensive point of view.
Yes, it was an awkward one for Saliba because Watkins was basically lurking on the halfway line, which makes him almost impossible to play offside. I think if he's 10 yards up the pitch, Saliba probably steps up there with Gabriel and they play him off. And once Watkins gets the ball, I think Saliba will watch it back and think, could I have got closer to him? I also think you do have to give credit to the striker in this situation. I mean, he does execute that pretty much perfectly. I feel like Ollie Watkins, I know he's a boyhood Arsenal fan, is a different player when he plays Arsenal. Whenever he plays us, I'm like, bloody hell, Ollie Watkins is good. And then I don't hear from him for about a year. Do you know what I mean? And then he turns up and runs us ragged again. Yeah,
I saw a question, sorry, I can't find it, but someone was saying, is Ollie Watkins somebody we should look at as a, potential striking signing? And it is one of those where he's always eye-catching against us.
Yeah.
And it sort of informs people's view of him as a player because maybe they don't watch him week in, week out for Villa. He's a good player, no question. But, he does always seem to deliver.
He's very up for these Arsenal games, that's for sure. But it's a good finish. I did wonder, it's quite close to the keeper, but it's hit with a lot of power and very low. So, I don't know.
I mean, it is a very good finish. I think it's way more a good finish than it is any kind of poor goalkeeping. 1-0 down. Far from ideal, not a great way to start the game because, we've been talking about maybe getting a fast start ourselves rather than handing one to the opposition. Nevertheless, I think we did pretty well after the goal. I thought we caused Villa some problems. Obviously, the goal that we got, the equaliser, is a sort of, I won't say opportunistic, but the ball falls brilliantly for Saka and he just puts it away. It's an amazing finish from Bukayo Saka, but I think it's a consequence of the team pushing as much as anything else.
Yes, I mean, I think we created an opportunity literally a few moments before this, which was kind of similar with, I think, again, the same combination of Jorginho finding White on the overlap and he squared it. And the commentator said that Tyrone Mings cleared it. I mean, I have to say, it wasn't conclusive to me who got the touch on it, whether it was Mings or Nketiah. But
I'd have to watch that again. I just assumed it was Mings. It wasn't a great header. Let me see. Yeah. Anyway, keep going. I'll have a look.
So I mean, this is the one that's cleared from right under the bar.
Oh,
on the 11th minute.
Sorry. Yeah.
So yeah, it was a similar build-up, pass to White on the outside and him getting in the box. I mean, when you watch this one back, I do think if you're an Aston Villa fan, you will wonder why on earth Tyrone Mings keeps that in play. Why doesn't he just put it behind?
Yeah,
it's really strange.
It's a bad decision, I think, just to sort of head it back into an area where potentially someone can do something extraordinary. It's a brilliant finish, isn't it?
It is an incredible shot. Yeah, I mean, the way it's still rising as it hits the net is very pretty to look at. And I liked the Thierry Henry tribute celebration as well, over by the corner flag.
Yes.
And Saka continues to be a player who steps up in big moments for Arsenal. When they need something. He invariably is the guy who produces.
Well, I mean, that's been the case for a while. And I think what we're seeing is, it will be hardly a surprise if I was to say that Bukayo Saka is a special player and a special talent. But, he is still only 21 years of age. And to be producing what he's producing at that age on such a consistent basis is remarkable. We have a very, very special talent on our hands here. And it's a joy to watch him develop. Like, have you seen, I think it's the last goal, the Martinelli goal. And as the goal is being scored, the players are watching from behind, and Saka basically in the 97th minute, whatever it is, makes a sprint through midfield to catch up so he can join in the celebrations.
I know, we all have our worries about fatigue and rotation.
Yeah.
But, I mean, clearly, athletically, this boy's still got so much left in the tank.
Incredible.
I do think it's amazing. And I think maybe we'll have questions about this, but the story of his game in particular is one of persistence in the face of, really tricky, difficult physicality. I mean, he's getting kicked pillar to post week in, week out, and he refuses to be cowed by that.
We do have questions about that. So maybe we'll park that discussion for part two, because there are some questions about that. But I think you're right. There's a sort of relentlessness to him, and it doesn't matter how many times he's kicked. It doesn't matter how hurt he is. It doesn't matter what stage of the game it is. He's always there trying to make something happen. And
at that age, it's extraordinary. He's younger than Flo Balogun, who we're talking about. Oh, he's doing well in France. He's having his breakout season. Could he do it in the Premier League? And Bukayo Saka, I think, is about 3 months younger, and he's doing it week in, week out.
And has been.
Yeah, and has been for years. It's kind of extraordinary.
For a while. Right, the second Aston Villa goal, on a scale of 1 to 100.
Yes.
How angry do you think Mikel Arteta would have been about that goal when he got into the dressing room at halftime and was talking to his players? Like, I feel like this is going to be a feature of the video review sessions that they do in training this week, where he's going to show them this. Nobody won their duel, and that's not good enough as far as Mikel Arteta is concerned.
No, and it's a from a Villa perspective, pretty goal, play it out from the back, but it's just far too easy. I mean, the front three, I actually don't have capacity to look right now, but I'd be fascinated to know what had just happened in the game prior to that goal kick, because Arsenal's front three aren't really switched on. There's no shape to the press, and it enables Villa to play out incredibly easily and take 3 or 4 Arsenal players out of the game. I mean, Martin Odegaard at least tries to get close to his man, which makes him fairly unique within the Arsenal team.
It was a corner.
It was a corner,
yeah,
right,
which Martinez claimed and then got up and sort of bowled it out, and away they go. So there was probably a lack of organisation. Exactly, not getting back into position well enough, and they bypass. I mean, it's way too easy. I think from front to back, the defending on this, or the lack of defending on this, we make mistakes. Players get caught just making the wrong movements. Goes through Xhaka's legs.
I don't think Ben White will be particularly happy with the way the guy goes around him on the outside.
No.
From that point on, I do think it's a good dummy and a decent finish. I imagine the goalkeeper's probably unsighted by Gabriel. From once they get it into the box, they execute it effectively. But it's far too easy for them to progress to that point. It's one of the sloppier goals we have conceded this season.
For sure. And I think our first half in particular was... It's hard to look at that first half and not think that all of the ingredients from the last couple of weeks were in play. You know what I mean? Having played against Manchester City on Wednesday night, the effort and the physicality that goes into that. I'm not saying it's an excuse. I'm not saying the players were overly fatigued, but it is not unusual for a team that's played in midweek to have a difficult first half. We've seen that.
No, it was a short turnaround.
Yeah. But then also the Everton game, the Brentford game, when you're not feeling 100% confident, it can be, that's when you start to feel a little bit tired. That's when the passes aren't quite quick enough. That's when you're taking too many touches. That's when the movement isn't quite there. And I think all of those ingredients played into what was a really poor first half from Arsenal. And, the fact that they went in at halftime, got sent out early. Mikel Arteta's face on the bench as he was waiting for the second half to begin was, I wouldn't have liked to have been in that dressing room. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, I forget who actually said it post-game, but one of the players said that Arteta basically told them that the individual quality had to be raised. This was a case of Arsenal players not playing at their level. And effectively challenged them to do that in the second half. It's an interesting half because I completely agree we were poor. At the same time, Villa profited. They punished our lapses to the maximum. I don't think they had any other moments really in the game. They had kind of 2 attacks that I recall and they scored from them both. So, I do think that even though we'd been poor, we were a little unfortunate to be behind. And in the interest of balance, because I think both of these players really came through for Arsenal in the second half, but there were a couple that I was particularly concerned by. So one was Martin Odegaard, in that I just felt we weren't getting him into the game. You just weren't seeing him on the ball, and that's a bad sign for Arsenal. And the other was Zinchenko, who I think at his best makes a complicated game look simple. And I felt at times in the first half was sort of doing the opposite of that. Overcomplicating things a little bit at times.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I texted you at halftime about Zinchenko, and I said he was annoying me. Because he was, he's capable of better. And I think this maybe is what I was talking about, that first half where players aren't quite feeling their best, and he was taking too many touches and he lost the ball a couple of times, and the weight of his passes was not what it should have been. Taking a couple of extra touches, then a softly rolled pass rather than fizzing the ball around to give the wide man a bit of space. He was frustrating me, I have to say, and I wouldn't have been that surprised if, after 15, 20 minutes of the second half, if there hadn't been an improvement, he would have been taken off. But as it turns out, second half from an Arsenal perspective we were a lot better. Wasn't perfect, but we were a lot better.
Yeah, I think in the case of Zinchenko, and obviously I'm playing podcast psychologist here, I have absolutely no idea of the reality. But sometimes I feel like in the last few games, because he's sort of got this new role at Arsenal as kind of a leader, and he's got an elevated status within the group, and he's obviously incredibly driven and passionate and all those things. In the last few matches, I've almost felt there's been a tendency to sort of try and do a bit too much. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And I feel like simplicity is sometimes key for him, and I admire his desire to take on responsibility, but I think there's a balance to be struck, and he struck it much better, to be fair, in the second half.
So, second half, we had to improve. There was no question about it. We did improve, I think. We started to put pressure on Aston Villa. There was...
Eddie hit the bar quite early on.
Yeah, I know we've got a question about Eddie for part 2, but that one in particular, I thought he was quite unlucky in that he's got above 2 big defenders, got up early and looped the header in the right direction, just a little bit too much on it.
Brilliant header, I think. Yeah, I mean, he has got that spring, and he's always had it. It's quite amazing. You don't look at him and think he's going to win a header against Tyrone Mings or whoever it might be, but he does have that in his arsenal, if you pardon the pun. But I think he, like a lot of the Arsenal players, was much better in the second half.
He was. Zinchenko was better, and obviously he scored his first Arsenal goal. I think
that's Premier League goal, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, the fact that Villa basically completely ignored him, even though they knew he was free on the edge of the box. I mean, thank you very much for that Emery-esque defending and organisation. But, I mean, you can't give players that amount of room to take a shot. It's a great finish as well, isn't it? I mean, the quality of the goals in this game, for the most part, was really, really good.
That's true. And I would say, I know he's taken on a few shots in the last few weeks, and it's been frustrating for many people. But I have to be honest, I was watching him in the warm-up at Goodison Park, and they were just doing this exercise where, you know, they do it just before they go in. They play little 1-2s on the edge of the box and take shots from the D, effectively. And Zinchenko, of all the players, was just putting it in the top corner time after time. It was kind of remarkable. And we know he has such technical quality that it's really surprising this is his first Premier League goal. Anyway, it's a brilliant strike and a good moment of sort of opportunism from corners. I feel like set pieces were a big weapon for Arsenal in the early part of the season, and we've dropped off a little bit in terms of our efficiency from them. You know, some of our big wins, like Stamford Bridge, that was a goal from Gabriel from a set piece. We've owed a lot to it. It feels like teams are a little bit more wise to what we're doing on them, so it helps to innovate a little bit like we did in this chance. It
does look like there are a couple of new routines, short corner routines, and one of them obviously ended up with the Zinchenko goal. But Martin Odegaard, he had a big moment, which we'll talk about now in a minute, but he could have had an assist for Eddie Nketiah. It was a brilliant ball in behind. I think Eddie did well, sort of got the wrong side of the defender, just clipped the ball over the bar, over Martinez and over the bar. That was a chance, a big chance to make it 3-2 pretty quickly, which would have, I think
Eddie's second touch, he'll probably regret there. Like
it went a little wide, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, his first one's good, takes him away from the defender. Second one is a little bit wider than he'd want to be, and then he tries to lift it. But that was, I do think Odegaard's transformation in this game was pretty amazing. And I think he finished it with 7 chances created, which I saw Opta did a stat, which was like the most since Mesut Ozil against Newcastle in like 2017. So, yeah, that tells you, I think, how good he was. But yes, there was a big moment. We should have been even eulogising about him even more.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say before we go into this, I'm so glad that we won that game. Not for just the obvious reasons, but I do think when you look at Martin Odegaard's face after he puts it wide, he's haunted. He's absolutely haunted by that, because it sort of felt like, oh my God, that is the moment that this game could have gone in our favour. That's the game that would have, or the moment that would have turned it towards Arsenal. And
he's been finishing those chances this season,
Yeah.
He has largely been taking those opportunities, and he's been brilliant. All I would say is, and I guess this is exactly what you should do as a footballer in that situation, but it didn't. He didn't let it get to him, and it didn't sort of reduce his performance in any way. If anything, he was more determined to get there. But yeah, of course, he should score, and it's really good work from Eddie to create the chance.
It is. It's catches. I think it's Konsa napping and squares it, and you kind of like Eddie's reaction as well.
Well, I think that was all of us, wasn't it?
Yeah,
head in hands.
Oh my God!
Disbelief. I mean, you just in a title race, a chance of that quality, you've just got to be taking it. And I was kind of thinking, maybe it's not going to be our day.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people were thinking that. And
I also, sorry, and I texted you this, but I had this fear of like Arsenal have come from behind here to be level. I worry that in going gung-ho, they may get caught. And I just felt that losing this match, especially having come from behind twice and having had this opportunity to win it, would have been devastating. Like, potentially irrevocable damage there. And so I had this anxiety of like, we need to find a balance. We need to go for it, but we must not lose this match. And, there were moments at the other end where I think it was moments, 5 minutes or so after Odegaard missed that chance, that Villa nearly went up the other end and won it.
I know it's from that moment on, from the Odegaard chance on, the game is actually just unbelievably exciting and enthralling, and like a classic for the neutral. If you're a neutral sitting there watching that, it must have been amazing fun because it was open. There were chances. The moment you talk about, the touch from Leon Bailey it's just brilliant.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant touch from Bailey to sort of pick the ball up and keep it in play and turn and drive towards the Arsenal box. It's a great save from Aaron Ramsdale to knock it onto the bar. But Villa also had other moments as well. I think we had a corner, and was it Fabio Vieira was chasing back, and he didn't really engage with the player. And you can see Martin Odegaard shouting at him like, "You've got to go to the player, close him down." The shot wasn't great. It was a fairly routine save for Ramsdale. But between that, I think there was a chance for Gabriel from a free kick. I think it was Saka who was fouled, and Odegaard clipped the ball in. Gabriel headed over, the kind of chance that we've seen him take. There was a Saka shot as well, which went straight at Emi Martinez, who...
There was Gabriel's tackle inside his own penalty area on Bailey as well.
Yeah. It was fucking all going on.
Yeah, it was Unai Emery embraced the chaos, It was really helter-skelter stuff and fine margins. If that Bailey shot comes off the bar and hits Aaron Ramsdale on the head, it's a very different day, A very different day.
Maybe Aaron Ramsdale didn't behave in such a way that the universe decided to
didn't induce that kind of karmic retribution.
No. He did not. Emi Martinez was booked in the 83rd minute for time wasting. And look,
which is such a cop-out, right?
Yeah, it's bullshit. It's like you're never going to give him a second yellow card in whatever amount of time is left. If a goalkeeper's been doing it since the 30th minute, you need to have a word. I think there does need to be some enforcement of the 6-second rule again. And I don't know why goalkeepers are permitted to hang on to the ball for as long as they are. Yeah. Like, we all get it. If you're the team that's ahead, bit of shithousery, we all get it. But it's not just against Arsenal. It's every goalkeeper in every game is holding on to the ball for 15, 20 seconds at a time. And I'll just read this out because someone sent it to me on Twitter. I can't find the name of the person. I'm very sorry. But they pointed me to a Reddit post on the Gunners Reddit from Pingu3101, who timed all the time wasting, if you like, from Emi Martinez. And he said...
Very grateful they did it, so we don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. He went through a number of incidents in the second half. He said it's a total of 5 minutes and 41 seconds of the ball not being in play in the second half alone. He said one thing to make clear is not all of it is time wasting. There is a 6-second rule for goal kicks that needs to be taken into consideration as time setting up for a goal kick, and he can't find sort of average information on that. But you're looking at 5 or 6 minutes of Emi Martinez wasting time, which it happens, but then it gets added on at the end. And I think what I said about the 6-second rule, but also referees need to be a bit more on top of this. We saw it in the Man City game, didn't we? Ederson was booked. Was it first half?
Yeah, really early, 35th minute, something like that.
So that if you book a goalkeeper early, he can't keep doing it. He just can't.
I think home goalkeepers get away with more, don't they?
Yeah.
Probably than away goalkeepers, where you've got the fans on the referee's case about it. But I remember someone tweeted saying Martinez had just held the ball in his hands for 27 seconds.
Yeah. I was counting it. I was looking at I was just looking back at the live blog because it gives me notes for the things that happened. And at one point, I've just posted on the live blog 20 seconds. And that's the only update. I think I was trying to make a note somewhere else, but it was Martinez with the ball in his hands.
I mean, to be fair, I think he did put 3 successive goal kicks out for a throw-in.
He did as well. I enjoyed that.
It was enjoyable. But, yeah, listen, he got his comeuppance big time.
So, I mean, 6 minutes of injury time went up, and I was like, okay, well, maybe. You never know.
So Villa actually have the first big chance of that. So the one we're talking about, I forget the name of their new striker who came on.
The guy that they got from MLS. Is that the fella?
Yeah. What's his name?
I'll get it for you now. You keep.
Thank you.
You keep.
So he had his left-footed shot saved. That's the 92nd minute. By that point, Duran. That's the 92nd minute that they nearly go and win it. I mean, it was, heart-stopping stuff.
It was. But then,
something magical happened.
Something incredible happened. Something wonderful, something beautiful, where, let me see if I can find this. I did see this. Where is it now? Calv, who's at Cumbrian Calv on Twitter, says, do we now have conclusive proof that karma is real? After all Emi Martinez's shithousing, especially in the World Cup, karma has come back and kicked him square in the balls with a trifecta of boots. The own goal being caught at the corner and Unai Emery roasting him in his post-match presser. I mean, there is... whatever history you might have or anyone listening to this might have with Emi Martinez, there is something just so enjoyable about seeing any player who's been up to shenanigans in a game of football get a bit back in that kind of fashion. You know, it's just objectively extremely funny to see that happen. But it doesn't happen in isolation. It doesn't happen without us trying to score and getting up the pitch, and Martinelli spots the run of Jorginho. I think the technique from Jorginho on the shot is really, really good because it's a difficult one to hit when the ball is coming across you that way. Smacks it beautifully, hits the bar, hits Emi Martinez's head and into the back of the net. How long did it take you to start laughing? Because at first I was like, yeah, fucking goal. And then when they started showing the replays, honestly, I was just in stitches laughing at that because of everything that had happened. It's impossible not to, I don't know how you describe it. Like, what do you call celebrating a goal and laughing at the same time? There must be, we need a new football
maniacal
phrase.
Celebration, I guess. Yeah. I think... obviously, and the BT commentators really scared me by constantly talking about a VAR review, which I think would have been outrageous, really, given that Jorginho shot. And
I think so too. Yeah,
I don't think really. You know, Martinez dives full length for it. I don't think he can argue A, that he was unsighted, or B, that he was ever getting there. But I was over the moon. You know, normally, if an own goal is scored, particularly in that sort of circumstance, it's almost a little bit frustrating. Like, you wish Jorginho or whoever it might be could be credited with the goal. I remember Mikel Arteta in his final Arsenal appearance, the final appearance of his playing career, scoring an almost identical goal against the same opponent, Aston Villa. Hit the ball, came off the bar, came down, hit the keeper, and it was sort of really sad that it didn't go down as Arteta's goal.
That's mad. I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
Yeah. So also Aston Villa in 2016. And this one, I am more than happy for it to go down as an Emi Martinez own goal.
For sure.
It's, you know, it's all the more beautiful because of it. Listen, if Jorginho's shot had gone in off the bar, it would have been an absolutely incredible strike. I think I prefer this version.
I think I do too. You know, he's had plenty to say since he left Arsenal. and plenty to say to everybody. Look, if that's the kind of character he is, if you're going to dish it out all the time, which he does, you're going to have to take it when it goes against you. And I enjoyed the very perfunctory handshake between himself and Mikel Arteta at the end as well.
Oh, really? I didn't catch that. I mean, we have an abrasive character in our own goal. And had that happened to him, I'm sure opposition fans would revel in it. That's part of the game. But it didn't. It happened to Emi Martinez. And that's much funnier. And I think, I have to be honest, it's a great goal. I mean, it starts from Ramsdale and it's a really nice move. It's sort of classic Arteta stuff, up the pitch, down one wing, across. And I think something that we've been trying to do in last few weeks, I've sort of noticed it, but not sort of quite solidified it as a thought in my mind. But I think if you look back at our games against Everton and Brentford, I think there were opportunities where we tried to set for shots from the edge of the box, a bit like the Thomas Partey goals against Spurs.
Yeah.
He scored one against Forest as well. When teams defend very deep against us, I do think we try and create these moments on the edge of the box, and our execution of like the layoffs and the shots just wasn't quite right. And what we saw was a lot of like quite frustrating long shots against Everton and Brentford that we were like, why is this happening? But I do think that it's clearly, it's part of the plan. When teams sit in against you, the space, especially if they're, in two ranks on the edge of their own box, the space is just outside the box. And Zinchenko exploited it and Jorginho did. I mean, it's a brilliant, brilliant hit. Just absolute perfection from that point on.
Oh, but, that wasn't the end of things.
No.
That was not the end of, is there a more acute fear in football than the late corner that you concede deep into injury time, to the point where injury time is actually over, but because you've scored in injury time, there's extra because of the celebrations and everything else. That fear, when the opposition are about to take that corner, I think is a very, very, very specific pit of the stomach. Please, just clear it, just get rid of it, just clear it, somebody get their head on this, and you can envisage all kinds of ways that the opposition might score a goal. So for that to be something we were facing, you get the complete 180 from the fear to the absolute, I can't believe this, when we've gone up the other end and scored a goal that seals the game. I mean, it fucking does things to you, football, that you would not allow anything else to do in your life, because, why would you?
Kill you.
It would kill you. Why would you deliberately subject yourself to stuff that gives you terror? And my heart is going, my fucking Garmin watch at one point was probably going, it's got a heartbeat monitor in it. It tells you if your heartbeat is abnormal. I'm sure it was banging away, but I was just trying to pay attention to what was going on the screen. Emi Martinez went up for the for the corner, and we cleared it, and from there, it's it's just so much fun to see what happens next.
It's amazing, and I have to say, actually, I think we've got to give some credit to Fabio Vieira, because you do see this scenario of goalkeepers going up relatively. It's uncommon, but it happens time to time. It's quite rare that the team actually effectively execute the counter-attack and score.
Yeah.
I think, because of the game state, there's just a sense of just get it clear, or to have the composure in that moment to carry the ball, look up, perceive the situation, understand the run that's being made by Martinelli, and then bisect the defence and play him through. I think it's a really smart bit of play from Vieira.
I agree. It's a really good pass. He controls it well. He doesn't panic. He doesn't try and shoot. himself, which I think might be tempting for some
you see that
players.
a lot.
Yeah. I'll go for the spectacular long one. No, he held it well, timed the pass. I mean, I don't think in all my years of watching football I've ever seen a player celebrate an assist before the player he's given the ball to has even touched the ball to go through to score a goal that he then celebrates himself before the ball hits the back of the net. I've never seen anything like it.
No, but I think Vieira, like all of us, was just thinking there probably isn't a player you'd rather see racing onto that ball than Martinelli. And in fact, earlier in the game, he'd had one where he'd run the length of the pitch. Do you remember?
Yeah, he just sort of, I think he stumbled a little bit, and by the time he played the pass to Eddie was caught on his heels little bit. Yeah.
But it was a brilliant run. And I think actually, like, one of the interesting sort of little subplots that we got a question about is his impact as a substitute, which was really substantial. But yeah, just brilliant. And like, we were all doing it. We were all Fabio Vieira in that moment, just like watching him race on to set the seal on it. Fantastic. And yeah, I mean, the celebrations on both goals were just brilliant too.
I'm just watching it again. Like Vieira's gone full platoon. He's on his knees with his arms up in the air, celebrating before it even gets there. I mean, there are shades of the goal that he scored against Chelsea in this one. If you remember, it was a Chelsea corner, and when Kante slipped and Martinelli went through and scored, obviously he had to beat the keeper.
It's easier when there's no goalkeeper.
Yeah, it is a little bit easier. I think I'd fancy myself for that finish, although I'm not sure I would have had the pace to streak away from the defenders.
There is an angle of it somewhere where you sort of see Emi Martinez's like desperate attempt to get back, and he kind of gives up around the halfway line. Sort of sheepishly walks back into his own goal. Yeah, this
is when Saka basically he overtakes him to make the sprint to get in. I mean, just amazing. And this is what I mean about football as this thing that surprises you, that gives you something that you couldn't predict, you couldn't expect in seconds. Like, we live through 90 minutes plus of football every week, twice, 3 times a week. And for the most part, what happens is relatively mundane, but it's these 3 or 4 second bits of magic that keep us all coming back. And what happened at the end of that game is unbelievable. I did enjoy the celebrations, for the second and third goals, obviously.
Third and fourth.
And fourth, yeah. Granit Xhaka being involved in the huddle for the third goal when he'd been taken off and substituted by that point was really brilliant. And there's a great little bit of audio, which is kind of hard to hear. I'm going to play it here when Gabriel is celebrating and he lets out this big, like, fucking hell! And then a big scream. So I'll just play it here.
Back to the top of the table, and Arsenal have come to Villa Park today, and they've shown the character. And Arsenal have come to Villa Park today, and they've shown the character.
That's great. I think there's also, I saw Gabriel Martinelli retweeted it, but there's a little clip where you can see him screaming, "This is Arsenal!" As he bangs his chest. Xhaka, absolutely incredible how he infiltrates the pitch, just runs across it.
I mean, shouldn't he be wearing a bib or something because he's been taken off? Was he wearing a bib?
I think he may have been booked
really?
For it. Yeah.
Right.
I'll see if I can find any evidence, but I have a feeling he was shown a yellow card for. Yeah, he was.
He was
for running onto the pitch and celebrating. I mean, it was pure passion, but I like to think there was a bit of cynicism about it too, because if you watch what happens, he basically holds everyone in the huddle to eat up more of the clock. So I wonder if he was like, just basically trying to eat up time as well. Amazing stuff. And, Aaron Ramsdale, I think, just goes off towards the bench. There's one huddle in the corner flag with all the players, and then there's another crazy one on the subs bench, which I think Ramsdale goes over to. There was, of course, we had a lot of questions about the row in the press box.
Yeah, we did actually. There was, let me see if I can find one of them here to put it to you. Yeah. Josh, who's at Josh is user 2433532213 on Twitter. And usually you don't get those kinds of questions from people with those kinds of usernames. But Josh says, there were reports of a scuffle between Arsenal and Aston Villa analyst after Emi Martinez's flying header. But I was wondering if James was working at the time and saw any of the sort. But you weren't working at the game.
I wasn't.
But,
I
mean...
My sources tell me that, yes, essentially, Arsenal, especially when they're travelling, will use the press box for their video analysis. So they'll have guys watching the game, and if there's things that they want to clip up and use in a halftime team talk, for example, they have the facility to do that. And they're in dialogue with the bench about that. So they're there in the press box, and I think Villa obviously had their guys there too. And obviously being Arsenal guys, it seems like they really went for the celebrations. They're the only guys in the press box who really are allowed to celebrate.
Well, yeah. I mean, you probably even shouldn't. There is a sort of protocol, isn't there, in the press box that
sure, but come on, it bounced off Emi Martinez's head, Andrew. They're only human.
Exactly. How could they not? Press box or otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think it went down too well with their Villa counterparts. But who can blame them? Had I been there, there's no doubt I would have been in the mix.
You would have fucking got in the middle of that ruck, sorted it all out.
I think I would have been on the pitch for Granit Xhaka, to be honest. Keeping everyone in the huddle.
You would have got booked, though. That's the only thing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, amazing stuff. And for the second season in succession, these beautiful scenes at Villa Park at full time.
Yeah. I mean, different from last season because we were kind of hanging on, but...
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much good stuff as well that I'm sure people over the weekend have consumed all the stuff. Martin Keown in the BT Sports studio.
That's great, yeah.
Isn't it? I mean, is it like a tiny, tiny studio? Like, is it 5 foot high? Like, is it because he's bending down? How did Peter Crouch even get in there? They must have...
That's a good question. I think they sit him and Martin Keown and they build it around them. And they're trapped there forever.
It's all right for Joe Cole. He's quite small. He can just wander through.
It was, brilliant stuff. I mean,
Keown Righty, Ian doing his stuff on TV as well.
Really, I mean, this season has given us some great moments. You think of that late goal, those late goals rather. You think of Eddie Nketiah against Manchester United as another kind of stoppage time winner. There may be others, but if you're going to win a league or fight for a league, you absolutely need moments like that.
Yeah, because not every game is going to go according to plan, and it's things that we talk about like character and determination and all these things that you can't measure in a team. Statistically, you can't. There's no XC for character or whatever it might be, but when it's there. And I don't know, let's go back to some of the as much as I loathe giving Manchester United any credit for anything, right? Particularly the Manchester United that we were so competitive with and rivals with down the years. There is something to be said for a dressing room or players on the pitch or your perception as a club, as a team that won't give up and will keep going until the final stages of a game, because you just never know. You just don't know what can happen. I think there is probably a correlation between late goals or late winners or late saves and the kind of characters that you have in your dressing room. Leaving aside the quality of the players, which of course is a big part of it. There are players who, you look at in this Arsenal team that you would back to do something in the final stages of a game compared to some players in the past, in the not too distant past maybe, who you wouldn't have had that faith in.
No, I think that's true. Fergie time was a real phenomenon, and part of that was the pointing at the watch and the additional minutes that would get added on. But that's That's barely half the battle. You still have to capitalise on that time. You still have to make something happen. And United really did have that capacity for a long time. And it's a really encouraging sign that we're seeing it from Arsenal. Arteta's talked about it. You know, you have to be able to win it in the 94th minute. It's kind of crazy, isn't it, that these 90-minute games can come down to the actions of a few seconds. Or certainly this match could have been decided either way in stoppage time. Shows you the knife edge that you're on in the Premier League. I guess that's what makes it so incredibly captivating.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way it's gone. When it goes against you, it feels like it exacerbates all of your flaws. When it goes for you, you feel like it exacerbates all your best qualities, you know?
Yeah.
And it is like the difference between, I don't know, you think about what Erling Haaland did this weekend.
Yeah.
You know, what are the odds of him, of all people, putting the ball over the bar from 6 or 7 yards with the goal at his mercy? You know, I mean, this is potentially, or that could potentially be the difference between, you know, a title or not a title. And I know there's a long way to go, but those kind of moments, they just happen in football, regardless of how good you are or how good you aren't. You know, you can get the rub of the green, or you can be absolutely cursed with bad luck in a game you deserve to win, a game you have all the shots in, but somehow you don't win. You know, it's just what makes football so amazing. Because if it was completely predictable, none of us would bother. But it isn't, and here we are, laughing at Emi Martinez.
And the stats from the Man City game are extraordinary. They had 73% possession. They had 23 shots to Nottingham Forest 4. Nottingham Forest had 1 shot on target, from which they scored in the 84th minute. I mean, some of the opportunities City failed to take in this game.
Unreal.
I was reading Sam Lee, who covers City for The Athletic. I was reading his tweets, and he was saying, you know, he was basically saying Forest are going to score here because City have just missed so many chances that it's inevitable.
Yeah, it feels inevitable.
And so it proved. And yeah, really, really. I mean, City did not play badly. They played really well, but they just missed a hatful of chances.
That was the icing on the cake that we had baked at Villa Park.
Yeah, and I had no expectations of that at all. Like, I thought, this is a great result for Arsenal against Villa. Puts us back on course. We go top for a few hours. Everyone feels a bit better about life. And, you know, we attack the league again from here.
Yeah.
When I heard that Forest had scored an equaliser, I mean, I was like, wow.
I know. I was out on Saturday evening. I'd gone out. We were going out for dinner, but we were having a drink in a bar before dinner. And they were showing the Leeds-Everton game.
Right.
And
what a goal from Seamus Coleman, by the way.
Holy shit. We were sitting there, and all of a sudden my phone started going, zzz, 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 you know, must have got about 7 or 8 WhatsApps in about 20 seconds, all about the Nottingham Forest goal.
Yeah.
Amazing. Because, I mean, that will just tell you how ridiculous football can be, and how, you know, we can be lifted from a place where after the City game, even if you're trying to see the positives in the way that we played and what we restricted City to in terms of possession and all that kind of stuff, of course you don't get any points for that, but you're looking for positives. You're seeking to keep confidence high and everything else, but you can't help but feel a little like, oh, fuck, you know, what's going to happen here? And this feels like the kind of shit City have done season after season after season. Maybe they don't look their best and they come to life, and then they just sort of steamroll their way to the title. And we do what we do at Villa Park, and then that happens to them, and it's like, whoo, flip. Just a flip in terms of mood and everything else. So,
crazy. I mean, crazy. And look, don't get me wrong, no one's saying those weren't costly points that we dropped prior to this, and we could be in a better position than we are now, but we are in a better position than we were Thursday. So
that is for sure.
It was a goodly morning indeed.
All right, will we take a little break? I think we should get some questions in.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, we'll be back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this.
Jorginho,
Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer questions that you sent to us on Twitter at GunnerBlog and at Arseblog, also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. James, some breaking news as we took our little break.
Yes, some breaking news via Cy Collings of the Evening Standard. The FA are looking into scenes in the press box at Villa Park on Saturday after analysts from Arsenal and Aston Villa clashed.
Wow.
I just said to you before we start recording, I think we might be relegated before Manchester City, based on the way these respective disciplinary issues are being handled.
I said this in the blog today. We've had more FA charges this season than Tottenham have had trophies in the last 60 years.
Well, listen. Our best teams and most successful teams have had a few FA charges in their times.
That's true. That's true. And actually, that sort of leads me to a good first question here, because I was going to ask you this one, but seeing as we're on this, it's sort of related to this. It comes from Prakash Narayan, who's at Tryan_11. And he says, "Goodly morning. Arteta's touchline exuberance and the team's not going to take it lying down approach on the pitch and obviously off the pitch and in the press box is a telling sign that we are developing an edge. It's riling up all the media and opposition fans, which is amazing. Is this the X factor? I mean, do you think this is a team and a club that is developing a bit of an edge? The sort of edge I think that you absolutely need, because it comes from how competitive you are and how much you want to win.
I think definitely there is an edge there. And maybe, as you suggest, the disciplinary charges are associated. I do find the sort of discussion of Arteta's touchline demeanour an interesting one, because, you know, there does seem to be a lot of focus on it. But if you watch Pep or Klopp or Conte on the sidelines, I'm not sure the way they carry themselves is markedly different. I also think that having such a young team, Arteta almost shoulders more responsibility. I think there's a lot that he kind of takes on for the players and shields the players from as well, with the way he handles the media in certain situations that maybe other managers aren't as obliged to do. But there is a sort of counter argument, and I was chatting to a mate of mine in the week who's a Spurs fan, and he was saying, "Oh, I think, you know, City will win the league." I was like, "Yeah, surprise, surprise." But I said, "Why?" And he said, "Oh, because I think," he said, "I feel like Arsenal have expend huge emotional energy early in the season, and I just don't think it's sustainable." And I literally, this came from a Spurs fan, but I do think that it's an interesting discussion. Like, there is a lot of emotional energy around Arsenal. I've said for a long time it's an emotional team and an emotional manager, and you see that in the positive moments so clearly, and it's fantastic, and it's why we all connect with it. But it must also be exhausting. I wonder, and I just wonder how. Well, it may not be. It may be energizing, but I can see that there could be a sort of cumulative cost of these big emotional high points. Can you sustain that for the 8 months of a full season?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe you don't get all the positive moments without expending that energy, though. That's maybe where it comes from. So I can sort of see the point. And I guess part of it, I think anyway, part of it, you mentioned Klopp, you mentioned Pep, you mentioned Conte. I think what they are experienced managers with pretty experienced teams.
Yeah.
Whereas we are perceived as, this might sound like a pejorative in a way, but immature. And I think that feeds into a lot of the media coverage because we're young. It's easy to criticize the youngest manager in the league. It's easy to criticize the youngest team in the league. Whereas I think if you are a little further down the line, people don't look at you in the same way. And I think that's part and parcel of what this is. And I have to say, I like, for example, and we'll talk about Saka now in a moment because I'm sure you've got a question there about it too. But that moment where he was fouled in the end of the first half by Coutinho, nasty foul, deliberate foul, and he stood up for himself.
Mm-hmm.
But the Arsenal players were there as well. The Arsenal players were around him and got stuck in, only as a protective measure. No doubt there'll be another FA charge for that before the end of the podcast. But I like that because I can remember in the past, you would see something happen to an Arsenal player and there'd be nobody. There would be nobody in sight. There'd be nobody backing him up, nobody having his back. I can actually think of one really, really good one, which was when I think it was Jordan Henderson took out Mikel Arteta at Anfield with an elbow. I think did he knock his tooth out or something like that, or was that a different game? I can't remember. But anyway, he knocked Arteta out, and Arteta was flattened, and there was basically no reaction from the Arsenal team. And I think what we're seeing, and part of the edge, if you want to call it that, is it comes from the togetherness. It comes from the determination of this group as a collective to win football matches and to continue improving and to continue fighting for this title. Because if you really, really care, it maybe gets a bit feisty sometimes. Whereas I agree. If you're a bit like, well, we've lost again, I'll go home and have a nice meal and come into training on Monday in my nice car and it'll be all fine. I think there is something to that. I don't think you can be a title-winning team without having a bit of an edge. And people talk all the time about City and how well they play, how technical they are, and they are, but they're cynical as well. Mm-hmm. They have all of that as well,
I think that's true. And in terms of Arteta's role in it, the degree to which a manager is able to influence what happens on the pitch is debatable, but he obviously prepares for it to the optimum. I mean, he's like Guardiola in that, and Arsene, I think, to the extent that he barely eats on a match day. He prepares like an athlete and all this stuff. And one of his buzz, phrases is transmitting energy. For him, it's all about what can he do to transmit energy to his team. And I think a lot of what we see from him is his attempts to signal to his players what he expects. He tries to live the game at the same intensity that they do, which results in some pretty amusing moments, such as the one the other day where the referee said the ball was rolling and Arteta. I mean, if the FA don't look at that, I'd be very surprised.
I mean, the referee said the ball was rolling after we made about 4 or 5 passes.
I know.
I mean, I can completely understand his frustration. But
yeah, the counter side to it, and something I am just intrigued by is like, how sustainable is that? At the end of last season, I think we looked physically weary, and it's impossible to know this, but I sort of had the sense that we were also quite emotionally drained. And yeah, if they can keep this level of kind of emotional intensity going until May, then that will be some feat. And I think Arteta is the guy, along with some key players, who's sort of at the heart of generating that.
Competitive dad, isn't he, you know?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Well, you mentioned Saka. I mean, Tom, the vacuous tweeter, at vacuous Tom, said,
"Don't do yourself."
Oh
down,
no, sorry,
Tom.
that's the different question. I did enjoy this question, which said, after Saturday's screamer and man of the match performance, what do we think the chances are of you getting Mr. Tumnus on the back of your next Arsenal shirt?
Maybe I will. We'll see.
If we win the league?
If we win the league, I'll get a shirt with Mr. Tumnus on it, as well as that fucking tattoo I said I've got to get. By the end of this season, I'll have to get like all kinds of, I don't know, tattoos and shirts and piercings and fucking...
You'll look a different man.
If only I had some hair, I could dye my hair a different colour as well, yeah.
But the question I meant to ask was from the more prosaically named Les, who's at 537 Smith. And Les says, "Goodly morning, guys. Are Saka's ankles made of vibranium?" We have to hope so, don't we?
We do have to hope so, because he took a hell of a kicking in this game. He took a hell of a kicking. I mean, when a player has his boot studded off the back of his Achilles and it sort of spins across the pitch, and the referee just sort of plays on, you've got to ask some questions. I know this is like a topic that we've discussed before. I think we talked about it the other day, didn't we? When we talked about how Arsenal give the ball differently to Bukayo Saka, so he's more side on. He's not always with his back to the defender, because the defender just sort of comes through and steams him out of it, and can do so with impunity, because, you know, too often he doesn't get a free kick for all the many fouls that are perpetrated on him. But he can't always do that. So there were a couple of moments where, you know, he does have his back to goal. He was taken out. I mentioned the Coutinho foul. I think that was nasty. I can't believe that Saka got booked for that and Coutinho didn't. He should have got booked for that actual foul. And it's hard not to worry, isn't it? It's hard not to worry when you see him go down 10 minutes into the second half and he requires some lengthy treatment, and basically the treatment is, well, here's a bit more strapping for your ankle.
Well, I mean, fair play to the physio. That was good strapping, as far as strapping goes. Like, it did seem to really help. I mean, I think I was probably like many Arsenal fans watching, thinking, I'm not sure he should be carrying on here.
I was worried, but then I was also worried about, like, well, what do we do? What do we do without him? What do we do without Bukayo Saka? Okay, you can bring on Reece Nelson. You can bring on Smith Rowe. Maybe Martinelli, of course, could play on the right too. But, you know, he is so important to this team because of what he produces and how he produces it. And, you know, maybe there's a sort of perception that he's this quiet, nice kid, you know. But I think we're starting to see him develop a bit more of a... personality is the wrong word, but like, he isn't going to take it anymore.
No, I mean, he gives a bit back. I mean, you know, he made quite a bad foul in this game. Do you know? Remember the one I mean?
Yeah, on Moreno, where he won the ball but then followed through. Yeah,
yeah, and you know, he was just a bit spiky in a couple of confrontations. He's been like that most of the season, actually, and I think it's an important part of his evolution. And it is a tricky balancing act for the manager, isn't it? In terms of, I think he really doesn't want this to get into Saka's head. Yeah. I think he really, really wants to avoid a kind of persecution complex. And so he's very sort of like straightforward about it. You know, well, it's his game. He's got to get used to it.
Yeah. Yeah, he said it'll happen in training. And look, Saka's not the only skillful player who gets fouled and fouled a lot, because, you know, if you're a skillful attacking player, sometimes you're facing defenders who can't live with you. So the way to stop you is to kick you, or, you know, especially early in games, you know, where a defender will leave one on and it's like, okay, fancy a bit more of that? Come run at me and I'll do that to you again. So I completely get what he's saying. And I think there's merit to that. You know, don't be perceived as soft. Mm-hmm. Don't look for special protection.
You're only going to be more targeted, probably, in that eventuality.
But I think we as fans, particularly as Arsenal fans, but England fans will have noticed this during the World Cup as well, that he gets fouled a lot and doesn't get the fouls that he needs. There's
It's interesting. I've tried to quantify it. I've done quite a lot of research looking at the numbers, and in terms of pure fouls, he doesn't figure especially highly. So it's like, so what are we seeing? Is it the fact that we're seeing fouls not awarded? I think that's part of it. But is it also the type of challenges and maybe the lack of appropriate punishment, so bookings and things like that?
Yeah, and I think you see other tackles get punished on other players way more than Bukayo Saka.
It does seem. It does definitely seem that way. I'm sure at some point they'll make me watch every tackle on Bukayo Saka in the season to figure out the truth. But it's as I say, it's a tricky balance between protecting the player's psychology and mentality and protecting him physically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Arteta has to try and figure out, I think, because I mean, he does. I hate even saying this stuff out loud, but he is quite physically robust, Saka. Like, clearly he's a guy who gets kicks. Like, there's no way he doesn't come into matches carrying knocks and bruises and, feeling sore from what happened in the past game. But his ability to play through that is pretty impressive.
I agree. I mean, like we just said, we were worried about him in the 53rd minute, and in the 98th minute, he is sprinting down the pitch to go celebrate with Gabriel Martinelli.
Yeah. Physically, he is astonishing. He's remarkable at that age, how durable, how consistent, his stamina. He's amazing. He's a machine. But we do worry about him because he's so important as well.
Fingers crossed. Frankie_Fez on the Discord says, what did you make of Unai Emery's comments regarding Emi Martinez taking it upon himself to not time waste, but to go up for the corner? He seems to have shown himself to be quite a difficult personality to work with.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. On Twitter, Niall Shannon said, what's your opinion on sending up a keeper for a last-minute equaliser? Do you agree with Unai saying to stay back to prevent a goal?
I guess it's to do with what's at stake. I
mean, I kind of feel like it's quite, if that's what Emery really thinks, it's quite illustrative, indicative of him as a guy and a coach, that he's like, well, I'd rather lose 3-2 than 4-2. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, he's got to go for it. And not going for it was often one of the criticisms levelled at him in his time at Arsenal. And actually, you can look at this game.
Oh, it's a very Unai Emery second half, isn't it?
It was quite familiar, I think, in terms of sort of having a lead, but withdrawing into it, rather than being assertive. He was saying after the game that Villa weren't sufficiently protagonists. And I mean, that was basically the primary theme of his time at Arsenal. But in the case of this Martinez thing, I have to be honest and say, it really felt like there was a lot more to his comments. Reading between the lines.
What did he say at the end as he was going off? Like he said, he knows now.
He knows now. For his career.
Yeah, for the good of his career, he knows.
For his career. Yeah. That is done with love,
But I mean,
yes.
I think I would want my goalkeeper to go up in that scenario because, maybe you lose 4-2.
He's just scored with his head at one end.
Yeah, that's true. He's already
you take one look at the way he tuck that chance away and you think, right.
I'm full of confidence now. I could bang in another one.
He has got sort of main character syndrome, Emi Martinez. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's very fitting with his personality. They'd be like, I know, I will save the day. But I think, it does seem like him and Emery don't get along great. I mean, he was very, very very clear on what he thought about that.
Mm.
And as I say, I'm not sure the football justification is that logical. Like, I think it seemed like there was more to it, reading between the lines. And one of the arguments for selling Emi when Arsenal did, I think everyone recognised he had quality and he'd been amazing in that short period. But one of the factors in the club's decision was that it was felt that he wasn't someone who you could keep around if he wasn't going to play. You know, like he wasn't. He'd made it pretty clear that he would be quite unhappy with anything but playing, and so. And I don't think he's got a personality that you could just kind of subsume into a squad easily. Obviously, he is playing at Villa. But in the week before this game, he came out and said, I want to be playing in the Champions League.
Did he?
I think, yeah, apparently so. So I do wonder if that may have factored into...
I mean, you might as well just say, I want to leave, because that's not happening at Aston Villa.
Well, and Emery was asked about it in his pre-match press conference and was like, well, my focus is on Aston Villa and I hope we can win a trophy here and go on to achieve being in Europe maybe in the future. So I do wonder how heavily that weighed in Emery's mind post-game. Martinez has had a fantastic couple of years and he's gone and won the World Cup, and maybe he thinks there is a move for him this summer. We shall see. We shall see. But he's an interesting character for sure. But the game I think is honestly like it's very homogenous at times, and there are very footballers are kind of a type, and I do think that the game is better for having big personalities in it.
Whether you like them or not,
Whether you like them or not, exactly. It's richer. We get to thoroughly enjoy his own goal, for example.
We sure do.
This was good from Simon, who's at SHS Harrington. And Simon says, should the club fine Martinelli for not dribbling the ball onto the goal line before heading it in? Is it that lack of killer instinct which will ultimately come back to bite us?
Yeah, we had a similar one as well. Dan J, who's at the last bean, said, as kids, we've all scored and celebrated a Martinelli no-keeper goal before. If you could score one now at the Emirates, what would your pre-celebration be? I wouldn't do the pre-celebration, but I do think the stopping the ball on the line, kneeling down and heading it over is just... at this level, you'd probably get your head kicked off your shoulders in doing it, but you'd love to see it, wouldn't you? You'd love to see it.
Oh, man. Of course. Why not?
We also had a question from AFC Monty, who's at Monty_official_, who said it was quite funny to see the reaction of ex-players, and one particular Villa legend get so worked up about Martinelli celebrating his goal before he even scored. He said, it's disrespectful to fellow teammates. What are your thoughts on this? I know mine. Laughy, laughy emoji.
Well, that was funny. I think Agbon Lahore chose his words wrong because, he said I didn't like the Martinelli thing, and he said it's disrespectful to your teammates, and I was like,
no, it's not.
I don't think it is. I think it's disrespectful to the opposition, maybe, but I think that's absolutely fine. He's got an open goal. It's I don't care.
I don't care either, but I don't really see how anyone thinks it's disrespectful. He's in a huge moment in a season. He knows he's going to score. He knows no one's going to catch him. He's got an open goal. He's having a little bit of a celebration, and it's another example of how people try to police the fun stuff out of football. You just talked about big personalities.
Yeah.
And how, look, for better or worse, they do bring something. They add colour to the game and the discussions and the coverage and the debates and all of that kind of stuff. And the idea that somebody could get outraged by a 21-year-old footballer racing through to score his first goal in a while, right? First goal since before the World Cup, I think. So he's been through a bit of a difficult period, and there were a lot of questions about, his form. He lost his place because Trossard started. The idea that you should then tut and sort of, hello, what's happening to you then? Like the celebration police, as we've talked about before. It's too much. It's too much. Let people enjoy things. And if other people don't enjoy the things that those people are enjoying, well, tough shit. That's life. That's what happens,
100%. And if you hate it that much, you should have caught him.
Shouldn't have retired, Agbon Lahore. You could have been on that pitch. Could have hacked him down on halfway. He was.
That was it. That was all he was. But okay, it is a sort of different tack. WMD Gunner says, since it's easier to discuss following a win, why does Arteta refuse to trust more than 13 to 14 players in his squad? Despite the fact we spent lots of money assembling a squad of 18 to 20 players, all of whom are his, he still doesn't seem to trust them. Goes on. With the game changing, can he be a truly elite manager if he plays the same 11 for 90 minutes across all competitions? Seems like a recipe for players to break down through fatigue and or injury.
I mean, I sort of get it, but at the same time, we can use 5 subs now. Previously, you could only use 3. It didn't mean that you didn't trust all the players. It just meant that maybe sometimes the context of a game or whatever else, doesn't lend itself to using a particular player. Some of your subs are just there for cover in case a player gets injured. That's the reality. On a lot of benches, it's basically these guys are cover for your first team. They're not really first team options. And I think what we have done, or have seen at least, is that Trossard has started. Jorginho started. Because, Partey's been injured, but Jorginho started and played well and obviously had a great assist for Emi Martinez's goal. There are going to be other players who can come back in and push a little bit. Fabio Vieira is starting to come in a bit more regularly and make a little bit more of an impact. Emile Smith-Rowe will be back and he'll come into the side.
Gabriel, see him in the squad again.
Yeah, Gabriel Jesus, when he's back in the squad, means that he and Eddie Nketiah can share a bit of duties, or we can, so that will start to expand a little bit. So I don't really think it's a case that, he doesn't trust certain players. It's just the reality that certain players are better than others, and that's why they're starting every week. Like, what do you do after William Saliba has a difficult game against Ivan Toney for your next game? Do you bring in Rob Holding? No.
No.
You don't. So it really is about, I said this, on the blog during the week, there's a measure of evolution to the squad building, where we are raising the level across the squad. But you also have to accept that when certain players are fit, they're going to play. And that doesn't just apply to Arsenal. I agree there could maybe be a little bit of a better balance between consistency of selection and varying things up a little bit. But I feel like we're in a better position to do this, a better place to do this now than we have been anyway.
Yes, I think when City came and beat us and you look at the depth in their squad, I think that does kind of tell you what's required at the very highest level. Their bench when they played us had Phil Foden on it, for example. Akanji, who played almost every league game for them. Calvin Phillips, Laporte. Big, expensive, marquee players, really. And there's a real... and to be fair, they're not as deep in quality as they were a year ago because they've lost Cancelo, they've lost Zinchenko, they've lost Jesus. But I do think there's an interesting discussion about in-game. So I think long term we need to build out the squad, and I think we know that, right? If we win the league with a bench that regularly features, a Mario Koja-Dubry and Reece Nelson, we've done well. But in-game, I find it fascinating. I mean, Emery made 5 changes by about 78th minute, right?
Yeah.
So at one point in the game, he had made 5 subs to Arsenal's 1. And I was watching that and thinking, is there a necessity for us to make changes purely to live with that physically? Like, they've changed half their outfield team for fresh legs with 20 minutes to go. I do think as the season wears on, like, are we not going to... And, you know, it really nearly worked for them. Like, Leon Bailey was one of those subs and was a real threat and very nearly scored. And Duran nearly scored as well by running in behind at a point in the game where we'd had guys on the pitch for 70, 80 minutes, 90 minutes. They were knackered and these guys were fresh. When your opponent makes as many changes as that, and I'm not saying they were successful, is there almost a physical necessity for Arteta to make more changes?
I think that's very interesting, yeah. I think that's an interesting point. The freshness
we made
of
5
legs.
in the end, but 2 of those were in the 95th minute.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the Emery subs and it just, you know, I know Bailey had an impact, but it just felt a bit like, right, I'll put 2 on, shift around the team. They were definitely fresh legs substitutions rather than tactical.
He brought all his attackers off, for fresh legs.
Yeah. But I mean, from our perspective on that, you don't really sub your centre halves either. Maybe you can do it with the fullbacks, and we did it on one side with Tomiyasu coming on for Ben White.
Yeah.
Tierney got on in the end, but it was at 3-2, I think, at that point, wasn't it? So, you know, maybe that's where you can do a little bit better, but I think he was looking at what the team were doing from an attacking perspective to try and win the game and didn't necessarily want to upset that. But yeah. It might be a thing. It might be just something that develops over time where when teams are making 5 subs, particularly in the last 15, 20 minutes, you might have to react a little bit to that. But it depends again on a manager who might think, well, you know, we have to focus more on what we're doing than what the opposition are doing, unless, you know, it sparks a huge change in the way that the game goes. And actually, you could probably talk a little bit about Bernardo Silva moving forward against Man City and how that changed the game a bit from City's perspective. Could we have done something tactically or from the bench that might have countered that? So,
but I think I think broadly this was a victory for the depth and the squad. I think if you look at the fact that, you know, White and Tomiyasu shared the game, Jorginho came in, and I have to say, I thought on the ball was really, really good. If you look at pretty much every chance Arsenal created in this match, the penultimate pass is from him.
Did really well for the first goal as well, didn't he? There was a little sort of swivel or something to keep the ball and moved it out to Ben White, I think.
Yeah, I think, you know, I can understand questions physically, and, you know, you might look at the Villa's first couple of goals and say, you know, does Thomas Partey help us in those situations? Potentially, yes. But in terms of his ability on the ball, you know, he's clearly very good, and I thought his passing was very strong. But, you know, Vieira came on, made a contribution. I think it's interesting that Martinelli's 2 best performances of the last month or so have come as a substitute. So I think of the cup tie at the Etihad and then this game. And unless you sign Trossard, you just can't really do that, you know? So I think this was a game where I was actually quite encouraged about the squad options. But yeah, I'm just intrigued by that scenario where someone makes 5 changes. You know, how do you respond to that? And Arteta ultimately got it right on the day, so fair play. I
mean, we have seen him bring on defensive subs at times as well in a game that we've been leading the last 10 minutes, the Rob Holding thing. We haven't seen a lot of that this season because I think we've tried to do things in a slightly different way, maybe be a bit more positive in our substitutions. Let's do a couple of quick ones to finish out because we've got to get this. Queen Gooner, who's at So Far, says, Eddie Nketiah, discuss. I saw a lot of chat about Eddie and, the chance he missed, the one that hit the bar. A lot of talk, in a game that ultimately finished well for Arsenal, but maybe where the lack of a goal from a centre forward could have been the difference as well. Some of the chances that we had. Mm-hmm. How are you feeling about Eddie and what he's doing? Strikes me like he really badly just needs a goal, because there can be to my mind anyway, no question about the effort. But when your centre forward doesn't score for a few games, people will always ask questions.
Definitely, and I think he was a bit unlucky in this game. I thought it was a really good header that he hit the bar with. I think he did take his second touch on that one-on-one, which played through Odegaard, wasn't great. Should have had an assist though, for the captain. I think his second half was better than his first. I think that's true of everyone pretty much. I'm kind of all right with him. Arteta clearly really believes in him and thinks that that's the right way to go. I think he does need a goal. One thing I'll say is he's still getting the chances. And I think we've learnt with strikers over time that is a good sign. It's when, that's kind of was the difference between Aubameyang and Lacazette, right? Aubameyang might have games where he missed chances, things didn't go his way, but for the majority of his Arsenal career, he was still getting in those positions, and that was what was encouraging. And Lacazette, the problem with him was it just felt like chances didn't come his way. Eddie is still taking up the right positions. He's still making the right runs. And I think on balance, that will average out to get him back scoring goals again soon. But sooner would be much preferable to later.
Yes, for sure. Saka Magique on the Discord said, do we need a new category of win to go alongside the morale-boosting fuck-off win that Amy Lawrence always talks about? Something for when the opposition isn't a top team, but the win has the same potential galvanizing effect. I'm thinking the fuck you win.
Well, that would be appropriate for this game, wouldn't it? Fuck you win. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll file this under that for sure. I had a couple of questions about this particular thing. Okay. I don't know if it's just too much being made of it, but Louis said lots of people are commenting on Kieran Tierney's apparent lack of enthusiasm for our fourth goal and his disengagement with the team. Do you think Mikel Arteta's selection choices in recent games are fair or affecting him?
I'd say he's hating it. I'd say he hates being on the bench. Because at Celtic, he was first choice all the time. At Arsenal, he came in, he was first choice, because he was such a big step up on the previous options that we had at left back. He's fit and he's not playing, so I'm sure he's not happy or disgruntled or whatever. The question is, would you worry if, tomorrow if Zinchenko got an injury, would you worry about Kieran Tierney's professionalism or his commitment or his desire to come in and do a good job in the team?
No. And to be honest, even in his 90 seconds on the field or wherever it was, he had a couple of good defensive moments, I seem to recall.
Yeah.
At the back post and stuff. So I'm sure he does feel a little bit disconnected. I'm sure he wishes he was playing more. I think and hope there will be chances for him between now and the end of the season. I would have, as I mentioned at the start, I would have given serious consideration to playing him in this game. So I don't worry about it. I accept it as kind of a reality of the situation,
For sure. I like this one from, where is it gone? Emil Smith, row your boat. He said, who showed more of a desperation to hold on to a ball for as long as humanly possible? Tom Hanks in Castaway or Emi Martinez for Villa on Saturday?
Yeah, it's a close one. Wilson, and Tom Hanks calls his ball, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Wilson. It's very traumatic what happens there.
How is Tom Hanks an Aston Villa fan? How does that happen?
I don't know. But we made Tom Hanks sad, and I can accept that.
I'm all right with that. I'm all right. I like, Tom Hanks isn't one of the bad guys. I don't.
He seems
nice.
like a nice man.
He likes typewriters,
right?
So I don't know what that's got to do with anything.
But it's a fact.
It's a fact. I think he wrote a book about typewriters. Tom Hanks, typewriter book. Yes, it's called Uncommon Type. I mean, I don't know that it would be high on my list of reading.
Sure.
But there you go.
Well, there you go. Recommended reading, everyone.
Sure. Final one from JMart91. Goodly morning, gents. Rank your favourite Arteta meme moments. The puss face versus Chelsea. The candle moment in the dressing room in All or Nothing. Or mocking the referee versus Aston Villa.
I think the mocking the referee might go in at number 1 for me. It was just... someone's clipped it up and set it to Staying Alive.
I've seen that, it's doing the rounds, yeah.
Yeah, that's doing the rounds, and that's quite good fun. But I just think it shows a sort of a side to his personality that we don't always see. It's actually quite funny, which I enjoyed. I think he can be quite dry occasionally. I
think it's one of those that he'll look back on and go, oof. He looks for high standards, but in the heat of the passion, in the heat of the game, he just can't help himself. Yeah. What would be your number 1? I think the puss face against Chelsea, because every time Richard Keys posts anything about Mikel Arteta, I just post that picture and reply to him. And it just feels there's very little that's more perfect in this world than that. So I like that one. Okay, look, we better go and get this podcast out for people to listen to. They've been waiting all weekend for this. So if you've got to the end of it, thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here, for listening, for downloading. Your support is hugely appreciated. I'm sure we'll have a busy week with stuff to talk about, so join us for all that. We'll have an episode of The 30 a bit later on Patreon, myself and Phil Costa, reviewing all the Premier League action from the weekend. Some fun stuff in there as well. Chelsea. We'll talk about all that. For now, take it easy and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye. Oh, Andrew, one more thing.
What?
I know.
What?
Loads of people have been messaging me and saying, like, when is something bad going to happen to James? You know, after we lost a few games, they were like, we need something bad to happen to James to really boost up the title challenge.
Are you recording this from your iron lung?
No, I'm going this afternoon to have 3 wisdom teeth removed. The title is in the bag.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Dedication to the cause. He's literally...
I don't need them removed. They're fine. I just thought, what can I do?
He's having teeth ripped from his mouth.
Ripped out. I'm going to be awake. I mean, it's going to be awful. It's going to be in 2 hours that's happening.
I don't know how you've got through this, because I would... You're going to be awake.
Yeah.
Do they not, knock you out for that shit?
They can do, but the guy talked me into it. He was like, the recovery would be easier if you're
No. Sleep. Put me asleep and wake me up in a few days.
I said, can I have headphones in? He said, yeah, sure. So maybe I'll just listen back to I'll get to this point in the pod.
What good are headphones going to do when he's got his fucking foot
in my ear? I don't know.
His foot on your shoulder with the pliers going...
Mate, I've had one pulled out, and the guy had to basically kneel on my chest.
Jesus.
So, yeah. So I probably won't be eating solid food this week. So basically, I am committed to the cause. I'm doing everything I can, right? This is the little coda to the podcast. Lump your money on Arsenal to win at Leicester.
We love you, James. Thank you for your sacrifice for the cause.
I'll if it's funny enough, so if it's funny and not harrowing, I will post a picture of my fat face.
What you should do is we should record a podcast later this afternoon, which is
good morning.
Well, listen, I wish you the best of luck. I hope it goes as well as it possibly can. I'm terrified for you. I'm as terrified for you right now as I was when Aston Villa had that corner in the last seconds.
Well, let's hope it ends as well as that. You know, let's hope Fabio Vieira and Gabriel Martinelli ride in and rescue me.
I hope Gabriel Martinelli runs the length of the dentist's office to poke one into your mouth, celebrating before he
Let's
does
just
that.
hope this dentist isn't an Aston Villa fan.
And has listened to this podcast before me.
Yeah.
Okay, well, listen, good luck, James. I hope it all goes well.
Okay, I'll give you another bye-bye. Bye-bye.